Hello, Raja. Thank you so much for joining my personal branding series. You're aware that I've been talking to a lot of thought leaders and asking them their perspectives on how they have gone about their personal brand and what lessons can be learned from others. So, thank you so much for doing this. We go a long way. We've been friends for a long time, and so it's so great to see you again in person on camera. So, I think yeah, it's great to connect. So, before
Uh,
we get started, it'd be great if you could just quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into the questions.
sure. Thanks again, Anish. This is a real privilege. I'm Raja Karthikeya. I am, by profession, I'm a United Nations diplomat. I work at the United Nations headquarters in the Department of Peace Building and Political Affairs in New York. But by passion, I'm a writer, and I guess explorer is too strong a term, but I do like to challenge the boundaries of what we take for granted. And in 2018, I crossed the Arctic and Antarctic circles within 1 year to raise awareness about climate change, in particular in India. I've also uh, been fortunate, I would say, in doing relief work, both after the tsunami at ground zero, after the tsunami in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and after the Gujarat earthquake in Bhuj, uh, for which uh, I've been recognized in some ways. But I've also made it a point to talk about and to raise awareness about the importance of not just volunteerism, but what I would say is but basically the importance for individuals to go ahead and affect change. So I speak about it, I write about it, and I'm really glad to be, here today. Frankly, in this series where there are so many luminaries, I don't know if I deserve to be here, but I'm really thank you very much for inviting me.
You're being very modest, Raja. So let's begin by the first question. So, what is the fundamental? How would you define personal branding? What's that according to you?
Well, to me, a personal brand is about being someone that people trust.
Mm,
Uh, Being a brand is about being made of something that people can define, even if
mm,
they can't predict what you do.
mm,
It's about creating through your life decisions a new set of choices
mm.
that people can examine in their own lives.
Right.
Uh, Frankly, to me, being a brand is about expanding the horizon of what is possible.
Mm. Brilliant, brilliant. So, I remember, way back in the days when we were working together. I mean, I still recollect a couple of things which very much stand out about you is that your ability to build brilliant relationships, and I don't think that anybody who disliked you. So let me put it that way. You were always like. The second was, about your ability to, just dive in and get things done. Like, for example, the volunteering thing which you did at Andaman and Nicobar, and so, and of course the language. I mean, I can't imagine those days when you were doing so many other things. You were still able to learn French, German, Italian, all kinds of language. So yeah, I still have that in my mind. So let me ask you, if I know you don't consider yourself a personal brand, but I think you are, and therefore that's the reason why I'm interviewing you. But what I want to know is, how do you know, that you are progressing as a brand? So what are those some of those things which tell you, yes, I'm making progress, in what I'm doing?
Thanks, Anisha. As you right, you said, as you observed, I've never consciously worked to create a personal brand. I know that having coming from marketing background, from the days when we worked together
Mm.
in marketing, I know that a
Right.
brand is one that can ignite thought.
Mm.
It can galvanize people, and it can create impact.
Mm.
So my focus, in fact, has been on normally when I've read a bit about personal branding and how people talk
Mm.
about what they want to be seen as.
Correct.
Whereas for me, it has always been about what impact I can create for people. It's not about
Mm.
how I'm seen, but what impact can my work create.
Got it.
So I am perfectly happy not to be known or remembered. To be honest with you,
Mm.
as long
Mm.
as my work is is remembered, as long as my work makes a difference and an impact in the lives of
Mm.
people. So my work focus, in fact, has been on achieving a vision. If you'd say, if there is one particular vision, it's been on achieving a vision of bringing people together and building trust among them. And to do this with empathy. So I would say that, there are, over the years, this has been, this has not come about in a day. It's not been an epiphany of thoughts. It's been perhaps the result of many epiphanies and many turning points and inflection points in life. And I would say today, what I seek to do is to break through prejudices that we all have. But I believe it's important to break through prejudices and solve our common challenges, whether it is climate change, a chronic conflict, or concerted denial of opportunity to the vast majority amongst us. So to ensure this vision of, if you'd say in one word, togetherness, I've been pursuing what I'd call as one-ism. It's to me, it means that without waiting for instructions or institutions, just go ahead, leap in, and do the change that you want to see. As Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. So I believe that you have to make that change happen yourself. Don't wait to be part of an NGO, part of a bigger movement, or just by signing a petition on change.org, you will change to the world. If you want to change something, you just have to go ahead and do it. And it means not to analyze ad nauseum. It means act together if possible, but also act alone if needed. Act responsibly with an eye, not so much about your imagined reputation, but consequences of your action. So that the first principle is, as you know, do no harm. And act because there are consequences to whatever you do. As you know, and I'm writing a book right now, which talks about how the decisions taken by individuals in moments of adversity can make an impact on entire communities. And I have seen this in my life from the people I have met. A girl who was fighting as part of a militia against Daesh, against ISIS, a young man who uplifted tens of his fellow villagers by hacking a trail on a jungle, after the tsunami to connect his village to the rest of civilization, even after suffering grave personal loss, after losing most of his family. I've seen this in the eyes and actions of of a girl who, despite having gone through some extra harassment and very difficult situation at work, went on to create some amazing impact in her community. I have seen this in people who have lifted themselves, from very humble roots, like people you have interviewed before, like Sunil Roberts. And I think these are all people who have inspired me. And most of these people have done this. They have not waited for anyone to tell them what to do. They have simply gone ahead and done it. They have not analyzed and twiddled their thumbs or watched debates on TV to shape their opinions. They have gone ahead onto the field, touched the grassroots, felt the soil, and then they understood what it takes, to seed a thought, or to grow it, or to see the fruits of their action. And I believe that the individual can be a more potent actor sometimes than any institution or any government will ever be. And it's a little ironic, coming from since my work involves working with governments all the time. But this is my personal belief and now, years ago, when Outlook magazine featured me on the cover for my work in the Andamans after tsunami, I came across a blog by a young IITian, and this is where you had asked me, how do I know whether I progress as a brand? And that was that was one of those moments when I felt that maybe I was doing something right. You always have some self-doubt. I mean, how do I know everything? Most young people, they know. I mean, all of us when we're young feel we know it all, but we don't know it. And even if we know it all, it's still good to ask ourselves, do we understand
Right.
it all, even if we know it? So when Outlook featured the story about my work, and there was this young IITian who wrote a blog, and in which he talked about my work, and he said he wondered why at the time of the tsunami he did not do what I had done, and how it made him think. I basically without leave, I took a plane. I was working in Bangalore at that time, as you remember. I basically hopped to, it was towards the end of the year. I saw images on TV of the tsunami. I jumped to Chennai. I somehow talked my way on. I really talked my way onto an Air Force flight going on to Karthikeya Island. And then once there, no leave. I probably didn't know if I was going to have a job. I had, maybe 2 T-shirts and no food. I slept on the runway. I volunteered. I myself as the only civilian who managed to get there, and I asked to work with the CISF, and I was CISF and Air Force and Army were working there, in relief operations, and as luck would have it, I a small team of tribal youth that I was leading there, we managed to find a road that was built in the Japanese army during World War II, and which had been 60 years in the jungle. And, that had been unaffected, was the only road that had been unaffected by the tsunami, even if it was, lost in the jungle. And that happens to be the main highway of the island. So when I saw the, islanders adopt it as their own road, I can't explain the joy, I felt. So these were kind of moments when I felt happy. But when I read the blog, I felt, there are people who are looking for a model to emulate, and that my actions can have a positive impact without me even knowing it. So once you see this happening, you know that the person is coming into its own.
Fantastic. I mean, I like the stories which you shared, and that's like very, heartwarming and very real ones. So if I were to ask you if you were to reflect on your journey, I mean, were there any particular building blocks of personal branding, if you can now piece it together and say that, step 1, step 2, step 3, or is there something like a process or some analysis which you can reflect on? I know it's obviously this is all serendipity, but just how do you kind of think about it now?
Sure. I mean, I think it's an intuitive process. And I think the first and foremost, your goal should be to have impact. And the brand serves maybe as an impact amplifier of sorts. But to start with, I think it's good to read about the lives of people, who inspire you and who you believe have made, a difference. When I was in primary school, I think I read about a man called Albert Schweitzer, who was a Viennese doctor. He was actually a medical student in Vienna. And at the age of 20, he decided that till the age of 30, he's going to learn everything that there is to in medicine and learn the violin very well. And at the age of 30, he was going to leave it all behind, and and he moved to the heart of Congo, which at that time was in the period of the heart of darkness, frankly. Say, and he set up a small clinic, in Congo. I mean, it was not a. It was at a time when the idea of humanitarianism was almost non-existent, and it made no sense for a privileged young man, to leave all the trappings of luxury and move to the heart of Congo to cure people of malaria and river blindness, and he did that. And he earned the Nobel Peace Prize in in the early 1900s. Not many people know him today. He was a dear friend of Albert Einstein. But when I thought of Schweitzer was very interesting. It made me curious. And then I saw, the lives of, other people, whether it is, Florence Nightingale, all the people we read about. Gandhi, of course, every Indian knows, or most Indians at least feel that they know his journey, but there is a lot more journey than what we read. I think it's important to have a role model, because we want to emulate ourselves, our lives exactly according to them. For example, Amundsen. was a big role model for me. In the fact that he did this. He beat Scott to the South Pole, and then of course he also did this great expedition to the Arctic, which is not very well remembered. But in Norway, I liked it all. In Norway, I was to see that Roald Amundsen is not seen as he's a hero, but not very liked because he took credit for the crossing of the North Pole by air individually and without his teammate. So years in order to redeem himself, in fact, he went on a rescue operation to find that teammate who was missing and he died in the process. And yet his honor has not been fully redeemed. This is what I think is it all about individual records and credit? Is that what your brand made of, or is it what you leave behind? In other words, how do you exactly want to be remembered, and not as someone who did something on your own, but perhaps as someone who, even as part of a team, did something extraordinary for all of for all people, frankly. So I think that is important, and to act on things that move you. To have you need to have a consistent set of values that comes across writings and your interactions, and you need to communicate what you're doing, not for the publicity, but for the sake of moving others to action, and then building a brand over a period of time.
Fantastic. I like the building blocks there of having the consistency, being values led. So I think that's interesting. I think you answered part of my next question, which is about the attributes of a personal brand. And I know some how would how do people look at you, and what are some of those keywords that come to their mind if they were to think of Raja? So I think that's really fundamentally the question I wanted to ask.
Sure. Well, I think you should ask people, but I'll tell you this from what I know. I've seen this from the way I'm usually, I get introduced at social interactions to people who are complete strangers. And the way I'm introduced is usually as someone who takes the path less traveled. They know that if there is a beaten path during a hike, I'll always look for that one that is perhaps, and I'll wonder where does that go? That thing through the thicket, that little trail through the thicket, does it go somewhere? A curiosity, I think I'm introduced to someone who's very curious, willing to learn, who takes the path less traveled, as I said, but who takes risks for a greater cause. And I don't, want to say this in any kind of a self-aggrandizing way of sorts, but I believe, I genuinely believe that I will do whatever it takes, difference for people who I don't know, and I don't need to, and they don't need to. I believe that all of us, work for people we know, our family, our friends, our children, but only a few of us have, the genuine privilege sometimes in life, the opportunity to work for people that we don't know and who may never even remember our name. And to me, that has given me the most satisfaction in life whenever I've done that. And so that's who I'm introduced as sometimes. And of course, I'm introduced as someone who has this eklo cello spirit. But even if I'm not getting, all the support in the world, I will, applaud along. So this is it.
This is great. I mean, I think I would add two more. I think one is your resiliency. I think I've seen that when I worked closely with you on the Friends for Life campaign and other things. Your ability to just connect the dots, understand, how it will work, and just being there. I think that itself is a great asset, I would say. So, coming back to, in terms of whom do you, if I were to ask you a couple of names, whom do you see as personal brands, and what do you admire about them?
So I must say, my grandfather was a freedom fighter, and he spent 21 years in and out of prison, and it was not some of the harshest prisons actually in the country. I mean, and the family went through a lot of hardship, but he never gave up on his mission. And I mean, in 1920s, if you asked anybody, was India going to be free? I mean, they would probably laugh in your face. And I grew up believing that, all my friends, I thought I would ask them, what their grandfathers did. Uh, and they tell me someone was a contractor, someone was an engineer, someone was a farmer, and so on. And I was surprised. I thought everyone's grandfather was in the freedom struggle because I could not see how they could not be. And then I realized that not everyone needs to be. But
Right.
but the fact is that there are some who earnestly believe in with passion in their mission, as my grandfather did, and
Right.
to believe in it over decades through tremendous trial and tribulation. That
Right.
takes courage and resilience. So
Absolutely.
to me, he was a personal brand it inspired. My father, as a journalist, also, through his work, he believed that his work it's not just a paid job, but that being a journalist, involves having a duty towards society. And to me, that I mean, I think that has been very moving to me. My mother and sister, I think, like your family is always your learning point. My mother, with the fact that she has not tried to make a personal brand of herself, but she has always given me the tenets of what makes for a personal brand. The wisdom that has come down from her grandparents. And my sister, through her, simply through her resilience. So I think who do I admire as a personal brand? I would say first and foremost, my family, and then there are a few others, like Dag Hammarskjöld, the former Secretary General.
Right.
I think whose uh, uh, whose attitude and whose worldview, frankly, of has actually shaped generations of uh, people who have joined the United Nations, like me, crazy-eyed, idealists who somehow still manage to get in this world of real politics, still manage to make a difference when it's needed the most.
Fantastic. So, I think you spoke about some of the challenges, and I think it's important to understand from you, while you're going about building a brand, you have taken various decisions in your life. And so what are some of those challenges while you went about building your brand, and what did you do? I know you mentioned about being resilient, but I know that there were many inflection points, like you took that step of quitting the job and going and studying, and itself is a big risk, but then it helped you go somewhere else. So what are some of the challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
I think the first and foremost challenge is, how shall we say, overcoming self-doubt. And
Interesting.
um, uh, it's also, a lot of us, especially growing up in India, if you grow up in middle class, lower middle class India in general, you don't grow up with very strong self-esteem. Not
Right.
for any other, not because it's socially imposed, but it's just a place where we are a collective society, and we're not made to, to be too individualistic or to,
Yeah.
or to feel like we know it all.
Got it.
So, and at such times, self-doubt is normal. And we're often asked, what exactly do I need to do? So overcoming self-doubt is very important, especially when people tell you something might happen if you do this. And how do you overcome that? And if not one, but 10 people tell you,
Yes.
when I was, in 2001, when I was in Gujarat and there was an earthquake, and there were 40 of us from the college who had gone there. And they asked us to return. We had gone there for a youth festival, and 39 of us. I chose to stay back, and everyone said, "You don't know what's going to happen. There isn't even safe drinking water here. What do you know?" So, but I wanted to travel to Bhuj, the center of the earthquake. We were in Ahmedabad, and I wanted to travel to the epicenter. So I went to the airport and somehow talked my way onto, I had some skills in amateur radio, and that helped. But I talked my way onto an Air Force flight carrying, Swiss Army's rescue regiment, and made it to the epicenter. and I became their interpreter actually.
Wow.
In fact, because I spoke French, and without even just started voluntarily interpreting, and
Right.
the interpretation was extraordinary in the sense that it was absolutely. Have you ever seen an interpreter? Doing his interpreting between one side above the ground and another side, but about uh, 20 feet under the ground.
Wow. Okay.
That's what it was, because I was actually talking to the survivors who were buried under the rubble to keep them awake, and I had to translate for them instructions from the Swiss rescue crews at times, and I was trying to pinpoint their exact position. So and then sometimes keep their morale up, so that as we go through, they stay awake. And we were able to rescue, 4 people. I think the rescue of this 4-year-old girl was a very particularly moving thing for me. So self-doubt, overcome self-doubt at such times when everybody tells you that this is crazy. Second, I think the challenge is to overcome, the resources of. When I say resources, I mean awareness as well as resources. Most
Right.
often, we don't know what else is out there in the world.
Right.
For most of us, engineering, medicine, law,
Yeah.
this is the tried and
Exactly.
tested when it comes to professionally, and
Right.
we often try to change the world through professionally through what we are
Yeah.
doing. Which is great.
Yeah.
If you're able to do that, excellent. If you are perhaps a lawyer who takes on pro bono cases and who fights for those who have been disenfranchised and marginalized, excellent. And kudos to for instance, Prashant Bhushan, who stood up recently. And all the work people like him, lawyers like him, or Indira Jaising, that they've done in India. But
Right.
what if you're not that? What if you're not able to do that? If you don't even have the awareness of it. So if you just have to make your ends meet, then are you able to, like many people did, during the lockdown, helping out the migrant workers, providing
Correct.
them water, doing
Yeah.
whatever they could. Are you able to? Are you able to do? Many of us, for instance, donate 1 day's salary when a disaster happens. But are you
Right.
able to do something? So gaining and having that awareness, in my view, I was lucky because the company sent me that I was working for, sent me to Egypt, and while I was there, I felt that more than natural disasters, man-made disasters were the ones that took the most toll. Basically, wars and conflict. So that's when that helped me have the awareness, and when I spoke to a lot of diplomats while in Cairo, it helped shape my understanding of international relations and how this is perhaps a way in which I can make difference. The other challenge is, I'd say, negotiating your fears. There are lots of, we all carry, these insecurities. What if I'm not saving enough money, for a rainy
Yeah.
day? What's going to happen to me, if I leave a good, a well-earning private sector job? What will happen to me after the age of 60? I think it's very, these are very genuine fears. At such times, I follow my passions. I have a motto. I shall either, in Latin, it's aut inveniam viam aut faciam. It is, I shall either find a way or make one. You don't have a coat of arms and a motto, but it's always
Right.
good to have one line that keeps coming to you every morning. And say, whenever you're faced with, a fear or a challenge, poetry has inspired. And I made sure that, I read and reread, the right lines at the right time, for all his faults, I like, Kipling's, Rudyard Kipling and his If, and where he says, and if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds of distance run, yours is the earth and all that's in it. And what's more, you'll be a man, my son. Or,
Yeah.
sorry, we had a link there.
No.
But
No problem.
where the mind is free. So, and external, this is what I'd say as the internal preparation. And the internal challenges of what if I don't have a family, and so on. There are some sacrifices you'll have to make in life, no doubt about
Got it.
it.
Yeah.
You have to negotiate. constantly with yours. But externally, I think it's very important, in building a brand, it's to keep your word. I believe that no matter what happens, if you say that you'll do something, you have to do it. There's no getting out of it. So it means not to indulge in sarcasm or waste time in bringing down others in order to rise. So very good, but where I was fortunate to be a leader, I followed diligently and I learned. And I believe also that traveling, opens the mind. And if you're not able to travel, and I didn't have a lot of resources to travel, most of my travel has been on work, or sometimes on in other ways somehow that I managed on expeditions and so on. But otherwise, learning a language is the door to learning about other people and cultures from your home. So at one point I was able to speak 13 languages to some degree of proficiency, and it was merely curiosity. I mean, I wish I could keep up the same pace now. But it's important to communicate your beliefs about how to achieve a just society. In my case, that is my being my vision to friends. You don't want to impose anything. You want to you want to trigger thought. In, and how do you can do it in the dining room over or it is in a cafe over coffee. But if you want to reach people, it's important to write. It's important to articulate your thoughts, in writing. Or at least perhaps if you're a TV commentator, it's fine. If you're talking it on television. But in my case, I publish widely. I write an op-ed on some issue, almost on a contemporary issue every quarter, even now. And when you're using social media, just be responsible. Be responsible because you do not want to spread anything that divides people. If you have, share things that bring people together. So this is what I've done.
Fantastic. No, I think you again partly answered the next question about advice for people who are thinking of their personal brands. But I would ask you specifically around this situation, COVID time. There's again a crisis. So how do what is your advice for maybe one piece of advice for someone who's thinking of their personal brands in this kind of a scenario?
Yes, I mean, I would say times like this, every crisis is an opportunity, right? As they say. So I think I have started doing this where I believe, taking up things that I felt were a challenge. Painting. I sketched, but I could not paint. So these were times when I did. And I tried to raise awareness amongst people to to be resilient and to also look at how a crisis like corona is very similar to what we have. Climate change is exactly like slow a coronavirus case. So this is why we need to I keep talking about climate adaptation, which means that climate perhaps so far gone that we have to change drastically, not just the way we live, but the way we build, the way we prepare, even the way we do internal security in a country. So I've talked about this, and I've used this opportunity. I served in Afghanistan and Iraq in hardship settings with the United Nations. And my work, it often you were cooped up inside, a very tiny compound with space to live. So kind of prepared me for the lockdown, though not entirely. But it helped, for me to share as to how I dealt with a life then. So during moments of crisis, I think this is when you need to look at how this crisis is taking a toll on everyone, but not equally. And then look at those on whom it's taking a greater toll, like we saw with the migrant workers. What can we do? So then it takes mind off our own difficulties, and it gives us a new perspective altogether, and we emerge stronger and better, frankly, out of the crisis because of that.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, I mean, related to that, I just want to ask you, there are these youngsters out there who think that, creating a YouTube video and being a one-time hit is, what makes your personal brand. So what's your advice for youngsters? And if you are reflecting on your youth and how you thought about yourself and how currently the generation should think, what's your advice?
Well, I think many of them are, I think today are extraordinarily clear in who they are and in how they're creating the brand. But I would say a few things that from my own experience, perhaps I had a steeper learning curve in that sense, for most of it actually, that let the brand evolve from your work, not the other way around.
Right.
Your personal brand will not flow from how popular you are, but from how trusted you are. So popularity is a factor of many things. Maybe the way you look, the way you dress, maybe the way you speak, maybe who's your partner can make it popular. It can be based on how often you pay the bill, when you eat together. But it's not about popularity; it's about how trusted you are. That's the important, and that's why if you say something, you mean it. If you say you'll do it, just do it. Whatever it takes. So if and you need to start with those small things. I see many people having this thing, say that let's say let's meet today, but then they'll come back and say, actually, today may not work, let's do it another day. Every such decision you're making, although it makes it, perhaps you may have logistical issues, etc., but what's happening is that there is a bit of you, there is a certain image of you that is changing, and I think pay attention to that. So keep your promises, no matter what it takes, and similarly, very important, believe in reciprocity. As they say, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. I mean, this is as old as Confucius, but this is wisdom for the ages. And frankly, let there be, people say this is my public persona, this is my private persona. I believe there should be no sunshine between your public image and who you are in private, because sooner than later they will catch up to each other. So just be who you are, and who you are should be one that is trusted. Then you'll make an amazing personal brand.
Fantastic. And as we wrap up, Raj, I just want to ask you, if you were to reflect on your career and your journey so far, if there was one thing you wanted to change, what would that be about a personal brand?
The one thing that I would want to change, I don't know if I'd want to change, anything, because I believe that what we are is often it's a layering process. It's we are not born as sterling silver, but we are honed through our experiences. So I would probably would have wanted clarity on what I wanted to do in life earlier in life, perhaps. But then I don't know if having that clarity would have made me who I am. So the only thing is, in terms of branding, certainly I believe that I am not very active on in social media as I would perhaps should be, and that can be I remember a publisher who told me once that you need to be a bigger personal brand before we take on your book. And it made me think, it's not about what I've done, it's about how much I've communicated it. So planning, I think, communicating, as my good friend, Sriram Curry would say, is very important in being a success, in making a success of your brand. So perhaps, knowing this earlier, the communicating part, I think would certainly have helped. But otherwise, I have no regrets at all. Thank you.
Great. This is brilliant. Thank you so much, Radha. This has been brilliant. I really love the insights. I'm sure everyone's going to really value this. So thank you so much for doing this again.
Thanks a lot, Anish. This has been wonderful, and all best wishes for the series. Actually, I'm looking forward to seeing many more of this. Really, and an amazing work. I'm so glad that all the work that you've done on internal communications, on branding, and I mean this has to go far and wide. I mean, at the risks you've taken, you have my deepest admiration. Thank you so much.